I just kind of wrote out the schedule, and then I said, okay, what's like a good verse to theme through all of this? And I landed on 1 Timothy 4:12, which is perfect for, kids. It says, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example in, and then there were 5 things that Paul tells Timothy to set an example in: your speech, in your conduct, in your love, in your faith, and in your purity. And so every day we kind of theme the day. Today we're going to focus on our speech, next conduct. Anyway, so it worked out really well. But one of the things I realized was there have to be some version of guidelines. There have to be some rules for Ask Camp to guide them, but they can't be this long list because then we won't remember them. They've got to be simple. They've got to be laid out well. And so I wrote out 3 rules for Ask Camp that ended up guiding us the whole week. And then honestly, coming away from Ask Camp, these are like 3 rules of the Ask House now. Like, these are the things that we're following. And when Chris reached out and said, hey, what do you think about teaching on this day? I think for me, I realized these are not just 3 rules for camp. They're not really just 3 rules for our house. I think these are actually 3 rules that if we can apply them into our lives, they make a significant difference. And so what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to call them 3 rules for life, but they really are 3 rules for Ask Camp. And here's the hope in talking about this. I think they're going to apply to where you're at. And I think there's probably going to be one that you feel like, I'm good at this. Like, this is my zone. I can do well. But there's probably going to be one where you think, okay, that one. And here's my hope, and what I've been praying for you guys is that really the Holy Spirit's going to speak to you and say that one. And that's going to be the one he challenges you on. And so here's what I want you to do today is you're listening to these. I just want you to just be open and just listen for that. God, which one of these rules, not all 3, which one of these is the one you're trying to speak to me? So we're going to talk about those 3 rules today and go over the 3 rules for life that we had with our kids. The first rule that we had was your attitude is a choice. Your attitude is a choice. I knew that if we were going to do camp, and we tell this to our kids all the time, your attitude's a choice. The circumstances and situations that you face, sometimes you can't control, you cannot do anything about it, but you can choose your attitude. You can choose the way you're going to react to it. I heard Chuck Swindoll say one time, life is 90% or 10% what happens to you, and it's 90% the way you face it. And one of the things we would do every week or every day at Ask Camp is we would work out every morning. If you're going to do Ask Camp, and that's part of our flow in our family, we are going to work out every morning. And so we would get up and we would work out every morning. And of course, I'm waking them up at 7 a.m. to go do a bunch of burpees in the garage. I'm there. And so inevitably they're like, with bad attitudes. And what I would say is, I wouldn't even say, remember rule number 1. I would ask them and make them repeat back. What's rule number 1? Your attitude's a choice. All right, now try saying that with a good attitude. Your attitude's a choice. Perfect. Well, workouts, and I think we know this, workouts are terrible or good, depending on the way that you approach them and the way you react to them. And I would say most situations in life are terrible or good, depending on the way that you decide to approach them and the way you decide to react to them. And the reason why I know this and you know this is we all know people who are in some great situations and they're married and it seems like they're married to a great person. They have great kids, they have a great job, but they just seem miserable. They seem like life is just completely terrible when you look on and go, honestly, if you just change your attitude, life would be better. Because the circumstances and situations in our life are great and terrible depending on the way that we handle it. We probably even know people who have it worse than us, but you look at them and think, gosh, how are they so happy or joyful? I know if you've ever been on a missions trip, one of the things that always stands out to people who go on missions trips for the first time is you have people, especially if you go to a third world country, who have, significantly less than you do, and yet they seem to have more joy than you do. And you're like, how can they be so happy? Well, that's because they've chosen to do that, because your attitude is a choice. Now, the verse that stands out to me and that I love when talking about this, and Chris Kafer and I kind of have a bond around this verse because we've talked about this a bunch, but it's in James chapter 1 where he says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And what he's saying here is, he's saying that even though you face trials, you still have the ability to choose joy. Trials do not determine your attitude. Hardships do not determine your attitude. The way that you approach things they do not have to be dictated by the emotions you feel in that moment. In fact, I had a life coach that I met with for a while when I was in Tampa who really drilled this concept. You got to choose an attitude, choose an attitude, choose an attitude. And one of the things he would do to force me to do this is whenever I would come in complaining about an attitude, here's what he would say. So if you're pushing back right now, this is my challenge exercise for you. If you're like, yeah, but you don't know my situation, Mike, here's my challenge exercise, because this is what he did to me. He said, I would come in, I would complain, I can't believe this, and this stinks, I hate this. And he would say, I need you to repeat that circumstance back in a positive way. Like, what if God is actually working behind the scenes? What if Romans 8:28, he'll do all things, he'll work all things together for good? If that's true, then I want you to tell the story back in that way. Tell it in light of the positive path, not the negative path. And he would basically force me to do that. And then I would tell the circumstance. And here's what I would say. You can do it with any story. Even some of the most tragic, you can look at them and go, okay, it is terrible. It doesn't take away the terribleness of the situation. But let me see how God could be working. And so if you're in a situation right now that you look on and go, this is pretty tough, like I would encourage you to look through it through a positive attitude. So the question for us this morning on this one rule, your attitude's a choice, is how are you doing at keeping and maintaining a positive attitude? In the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of everything going on, in the midst of all the political views that are shared on social media, in the midst of the fact you have to wear a mask out in public, in the midst of the fact that the NFL may be shut down. It's not shut down, but it may be shut down on the year where the Bucs just got the best quarterback of all time. Like, how are you doing? How are you doing at keeping a positive attitude? And the reason why this is so important for us to do, one of the reasons at least, is James goes on in verse 2 or verse 3. He says, you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance that helps you keep going. And then he says, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be, and he says two things, mature and complete. God's plan to mature us, God's plan to bring us to completion, God's plan to continue to develop us as individuals is through some of the trials that we face in our lives. And our approach to them will determine the maturity that we see from them. And the way, one of the things that stuck out to me recently is if you think of anyone right now, and this is think of someone who in your mind is immature. When you look at them, you go, man, I just feel like for their age, they really are immature. Typically, the way that you've determined that they are immature is because they've had trials that have come up and they've handled them poorly. They've had trials that come up and they blame everyone around them. There are trials that come up and they tend to look all on the outside and go, they did this, they did this, they did this. They have not chosen joy and they've not chosen a positive attitude. Maturity is going through a storm and being able to sit in the midst of the storm and go, God has got it. And I'm going to choose joy and happy. And people are going to look on and go, man, what's with that guy? Like, how is he so happy and excited? Well, some of it is because we choose joy, because we know that in our trials, God is developing us, he's maturing us. And at the end of the day, God is completely in control. I'm not completely convinced that one of the plans for God moving in the lives of the people around us who do not know him is allowing us, or at least watching us go through trials, because I don't know that God necessarily throws us into them, but I do think that God will use them. And I think part of the reason why he doesn't prevent it is because one of the best witnesses we can have is sitting in the midst of one of the worst circumstances of your life and struggling with something with a joy and with a positive attitude. And everyone will look on and go, how could they be so positive? How could they have so much joy in the midst of this? And then the answer simply is that because I follow Jesus and because I follow him, like I have the opportunity to choose joy, because I know even in the midst of this very tough circumstance, he is still in control. So rule number one, your attitude is a choice. We talked about that a lot during Ash Camp. The second rule is this. The second rule was your focus is here. Your focus is here. Now, I knew I needed to write this down because my kids, one of the things that they love, like any kids, they love electronics. My nephew, same thing. My nephew has a phone. My kids don't have phones. They just have little gaming systems. But electronics, it's a big deal, big part of their life. Right now in the summertime, they have 3 45-minute sessions that they can play electronics, but that doesn't necessarily include TV. And so their world right now is they've got definitely quite a bit of electronic time in there. But I knew if we're going to do camp right, I had to not just limit their electronic time, I had to take it completely away. And for us, the reason why I think this rule applies for us is that our world right now is built for distractions. We have the ability to watch more videos on YouTube than ever before. It is so easy. I don't know about you. It is so easy to scroll on Facebook, to look at some of the videos, to watch some of the infighting, to watch how people are so mad, and then look up and go, how has it been 45 minutes or 30 minutes? And then not only that, it draws you in, right? I don't know about you, but sometimes everyone, like someone makes a comment and you think, oh, they're gonna get it. And then suddenly you're in this battle and you're just typing. I've decided, for me personally, I won't do it. I don't think anybody's opinion has ever been changed by fighting on social media or by text message. So I won't, even though it's like, you feel this thing though of, I've got to do it. I've got to speak my piece and I've got to defend and block, all of that, but you get sucked into it and suddenly you get worked up over someone you may not even know very well. And suddenly you're more mean than you should be and they're more mean than they should be. But there's so many distractions we have going on. And I think in the midst of a time where our world distracts us and got so much happening, we don't need commercials anymore, and we just keep going. I think one of the best gifts that we can give the people around us, with the people we work with, I think with our family especially, is our presence. Is when we take our phone and we plug it in another room and we walk away. When we shut our phone off, which for a lot of us, we're like, how can I ever shut my phone off? You could shut it off. And you know the way that I know you could shut it off is because if you were in a meeting with someone that was, I mean, think about it. Who is the dream meeting for you? If you could just sit in a room with them for an hour and talk to them, you'd shut your phone off for that. And yet we go home and think we can't shut our phone off at home, even for an hour or 2 hours. But we would do it if we met with that person. Listen, there are very few things that are so urgent that someone needs to get a hold of you in an hour. And if you remember the time before cell phones, you know what people would do if they couldn't get a hold of you? They would wait. They would wait. And sometimes for our families and the people around us that need us there and need us with them, it really is our presence that's a gift. Now, of course, Jesus in the time, when you think about it, if there's anybody who had the opportunity for distractions more than anyone, it really was him, because so many people wanted his time, so many people wanted his attention. And he says, kind of in the Beatitudes, he says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 33, starts there. He says, again, you have heard that it was said of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But, and this is what he says, I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. And then he says this, and this is the part of the verse that we remember. This is part of the section. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. For whatever is more than that is from the evil one. And essentially what he's saying is, you don't need to promise. Just do what you say. And I think for us, the way that sometimes this plays out is that we have good intentions. And I think our intentions tend to act like promises. Like, we want to be something, but our actions don't necessarily reflect it. And it doesn't help if we want to be engaged with our kids or our grandkids, and yet we're distracted by work all the time and we can't seem to get away. It doesn't help if we want to grow in our relationship with our spouse, if we go home and plop on the couch as soon as we get home and just kind of just sit there and don't really engage in conversation. It doesn't help if we want to be successful, but we spend too much time surfing the internet or on our phone. It doesn't help if we want to have a godly home, and yet Sunday comes around, even with online stuff going, and we just don't go and we don't do devotions with our family. Like, it doesn't help to have intentions, which again, I would say those are promises. It doesn't help to go, I'm going to be the best husband ever. But if you don't actually do it, like, let your yes be yes. Like, don't get distracted. And here's the trick with this. because you want to be a good husband, because you want to be a good parent, because you want to be a good grandparent, what happens is that your good intentions actually cover up your actions. You think that because you want to be good, it means that your bad behavior doesn't count. Like, this is how humans justify all of this. And so I want to be a good, I love my family. And so your good intentions cover up your bad actions. And so you feel good while you do bad. You feel good as you move away from what you say you want, because I want to be good. And for us, with all the distractions happening in our world, my question is, do you have good intentions, or are you doing the good things that you need to do to move in the right direction? When you're with your family, is your focus there? Are you setting the phone down? When you're in a meeting, are you looking people in the eye? Are you talking to them? Are you reaching out to people? Is your focus where you are? And I think that's the challenge for us today, is our focus where we need it the most? Because our focus is here. And if we're going to be fully engaged where God has us, there has to be moments where we take our phones and we put them away, or we put them down, or we put them on silent, and we don't touch them, so that we can be all here. So your attitude is a choice. Your focus is here. And then the third rule that we talked about with our kids on Ash Camp was, your openness is required. Your openness is required. This was a great rule. And here's the reason why it was a great rule for us at doing camp, is that I knew we were going to do things that they weren't used to doing, and they would not necessarily be open to doing. So we just put a tent in our backyard. We didn't go camping. Part of the reason why we didn't go camping is, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not outdoorsy. That's not my zone. I can take 2 hours and like write out the schedule, but if it's on me to start a fire, we're driving to McDonald's. That's not my deal. I'm not that good. So we took our camp, we put it in our backyard, or our tent, and put it in our backyard. But because it was our backyard, the camp counselor got to sleep in the cabin, which means I got to sleep in my bed at night. Come on, Jesus, that's a good time right there. That was nice. And so they slept in the tent every night. And I knew if they were going to sleep in a tent every night, they would have to be open to that. Also, we didn't like make a real fire, but we do have a little bit of a fire pit, kind of one of those $30 ones you buy at Target. We put that back there, and we went out and we found our own wood. So we have some wood behind our house. We went out, we found our own wood, and then we did make a fire, with gasoline every night. But then after that gasoline burned off, we cooked every meal, every dinner. Sorry, not every meal. We cooked every dinner on the fire, on the open fire. Now, it probably works better than the way we did it, because every meal ended up tasting exactly the same. I don't know if that's just when you cook food over fire, it just was terrible. Some of it was burnt. And again, I'm not outdoorsy, so for me, we're just kind of figuring it out. And so I knew, hey, if they're going to eat this food, their openness would be required. And then another thing, we went fishing one day, and we caught just a small little fish. I don't even know what it was, to be honest with you. But our kids had said, they said, if we catch a fish, we got to eat it. Like, we got to eat it. And I don't know how big it was. I don't know what kind it was. So I don't even know if I was supposed to do it. But we took this little fish with us, and we basically took the whole thing and put it on a grate on a fire. We cooked it just whole. Didn't cut the head off, didn't do anything. Cooked both sides of it, made sure it was nice and crisp. And then we cut into it, and we gave little pieces of the fish to all the boys and said, guys, if we're going to catch a fish, we're going to eat the fish. And of course, for these kids, 10, 12, and 15, and I had to do it too. I was probably the most grossed out at the end of the day, to be honest with you, because the way that we did it and the way it was cooked. But I knew their openness was required. For us, and I think we're all in that reality now with all this COVID stuff and all the isolation, and the fact we're like, who would have thought a year ago that this many guys would be on Zoom? Like, who would have thought this many years ago that we would have said, okay, we're going to sit in front of our computer and do this? In fact, if this idea would have been proposed a year ago, before it was necessitated, we would have all been like, no way. Like, we would have fought it like crazy. But we've had to be open to the changes going on because we're forced into it. And in life, I think that, your openness is required, because change just comes at us and life just continues to change. And we have to be open. We've got to be open to what God wants to do, because as the culture changes, God changes. God changes the message that we do some of the things that we do. God doesn't change. The message doesn't change. And let me kind of speak to the church side of it. So again, this is, I don't live in Southwest Florida, or I don't live in Florida. None of you attend my church. So here's what I feel when thinking about openness and thinking about the church. What I've seen in doing some of the coaching that I've done and doing some of the consulting that I've done, what I've seen is that the one of the main traits of churches that are continuing to grow and continue to reach unchurched people is that they are open to change, and they are willing to change. They're willing to change some of their styles and their methods, but they really stay pretty strong to the message. And I think for us, and whatever church you're at and whatever's going through, the tendency is for us to drift towards what's comfortable, to drift towards what we want, and to really fight any change that comes along when it happens within our church. But if we're going to be a part of churches that God is using to reach a community, then there has to be significant change, and there has to be discomfort with that change. And Paul says, he actually says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, 1 Corinthians chapter 9 is an interesting chapter, because in the beginning of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul basically looks at everyone and says, quit trying to put rules on me. I'm free. I can eat what I want. I can drink what I want. I can marry who I want. Like, he kind of basically says, hey, in light of who I am in Christ, I'm free. And then he says in verse 19, he says, though I'm free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave or a servant to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win the law. To those not having the law, I become like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by some means I might save some. I do all things for the sake of the gospel, that I might share in his blessing. And here's what I would say, when looking at the church, I think this set of verses, that I become all things to all people. To the Jews, I became a Jew. To the Greek, I became a Greek. The Gentiles, I became a Gentile. What Paul's saying is, listen, we will change our preferences. We'll change what we want. We'll do what he was willing to do, whatever he could do in order to reach them. And I think the church has to continue to change. I think as music changes, our music have to change. I think styles, I think preaching styles, I think outreach styles. I think what's going to happen now in light of everything going on, like, I know a guy right now who's decided he's going to start an online church. Like, it's going to be a church only online. There are some churches that we're meeting that, I've heard they've said they are not meeting in person again. Like, they've decided they're not going to meet in person again. And so some of that is, it's going to change the way church has been done for years. But our openness is required for that. And for us, what I would encourage you with is this. Listen, there are going to be times where we go into a church and you go, the music's too loud. The preaching isn't what I want. There's not even any Sunday school. Like, man, what in the heck? What's going on? Here's what I would say, and here's the thing that kind of stresses me, because I'm 39. I'll be 40 this year. And the interesting thing for me is there are definitely some trends in the church that are coming that I would personally look on and go, I don't know that I like that. Like, that feels a little too, whatever for me. That feels whatever. But I think about Paul when he talks about, to the Jew I became a Jew, to the Gentile I became a Gentile. And when you talk about the Jew, like he became like a Jew to reach the Jews. Like I don't know if you ever moved out of your parents' house and then had to move back in. But if you ever move out of your parents' house, it's like suddenly you're free from all the rules. Freedom! Woo! You do whatever you want. You stay out as long as you want. And then you move back into dad's house, and dad's like, if you're here, you got the rules. Like, you know how uncomfortable it was for Paul, who really just thought that the law that was no longer applicable to him, he actually took it on so the Jews would be open. You know how tough, I think about this. You know how hard it was for Paul, a Pharisee, who was taught from birth that if you hang out with the Gentiles, you're unclean. Don't ever go in their house. You don't go in their house. You don't talk to those girls. You don't interact with them. You don't, because if you do, like, it is against God. It is unclean. And whew, you better not eat their food. You eat their food, like you're out. And can you imagine? Paul got saved. Can you imagine the first time he sat there at dinner with them? Hey guys, we're gonna wash our hands, or oh no, we're good. Okay, all right. What do we have? Oh, we're having ham for dinner. All right, because he was taught that was a detestable food. Oh, we're gonna have bacon. All right. Now the Lord's in bacon. I won't say anything bad about that. But like, can you imagine that experience? Walking into that house for the first time for him, for Peter, but he said, I'm willing to be that kind of uncomfortable. And I would say, I don't know how, like, if you want to be a part of if you want to be a part of a church that's reaching a community, there are definitely things that you have to decide. All right, to be unsaved, I'm gonna attend a church that someone like that is going to actually be open to, and I'm going to get behind them. And here's the reason why I say that, because the tendency in this is you know, when you look at some of those churches, that the music's too loud and they're reaching the community and they're doing that. You know what? I'm just going to stay in my church. And if you're at a church, don't leave your church. But let me just say this: this next generation of churches, the demographic that they are not reaching right now, they're not reaching seasoned Christians. And so they don't have the wisdom of the seasoned Christians. They don't have the influence of the seasoned Christians. And so if you're in a place, if you get to a place where you feel like God leads you somewhere else or goes to a different church or any of those, here's my push with you, is that go to a church you wouldn't normally go to that's reaching lost people, and become like the church that needs to reach lost people, and be uncomfortable and listen to the music you like on your phone on the way home, and listen to your sermons that you like during the week, but sit there, engage with the worship that's there, engage with the messages there, and throw in any way that you can so that you may reach people. Your openness is required, and I believe God calls us to be open in our message and the way we approach. But I think that's true, not just on the church side, so I'll go off that. I believe that God wants us to be open to change. Is there any area right now that you need to be open? Is there any area that you're holding on to? And you just need to release those things and say, God, I know this isn't working anymore. I know this isn't happening. I know that what I'm currently doing has got me stuck in a rut, and I feel like I'm in a doom cycle over and over again. Where do you need to be open to what God wants to do? And where do you need to be open to change and growth in your life? So the 3 rules: your attitude's a choice, your focus is here, and your openness is required. Which one of these is the one that stood out to you, and which one of these is the one that this week you need to put somewhere and write it down and set it somewhere that you see it every week, so that you can allow it to speak to you and allow God to do a work in you, help you choose a better attitude, or help you focus where you are, or be open in an area that you need to be open. Hey, let me pray for you, and then we'll get into some discussion. Jesus, thank you for giving us the opportunity to come. And God, I pray that you would continue to move with this group of men. God, the amount of influence they have in the Tampa community is great. And God, we know that as you are moving with them and creating this just complete growth in them as they go after you, that God, you're going to do some pretty incredible things. And God, I pray for us that you would give us the opportunity and just even the discipline to choose our attitude well. To focus where we are with the people we love, and that God, we actually do the things that we need to do in order to become the people that we need to become. That God, our intentions would not drive us, but it really would be our actions. And then Jesus, I pray that you would help us to be open in any area of our life, God, to what you want to do and the way you want to change us. So we wouldn't get stuck in a rut, but we would be willing to try new things in order to keep growing and keep going after you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I'll hand it off to whoever wants to lead the discussion. I don't know what's next.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't believe you didn't YouTube how to sleep in a tent instead of sleeping in the cabin. What is up with that?
Well, when I knew it was going to be in my backyard, I decided instead of trying to figure out how to sleep in a tent, it might be better for me to figure out how to sleep in my bed, and it was better for all of us. So
Anyway, real quick, number one, I'm writing to John now because he's obviously not with us this morning, so I'll be letting him know. But number one, James 1 and Proverbs are the best things. He is so strong in his faith, and he's texted out to 150 people. Who's in charge of his own Bible study and all this stuff. So a lot of this stuff I get to him, he's hurting, but he's feeling right about God and about where God has placed his whole thing. So thank you once again for sharing. Just continue to keep praying for him. Thanks.
Hey, Mike. So, what's up, my man? The 3 points I love, first of all, that I had to realize that the kid actually did wake up this morning, so the message was appropriate. So I'm right here, one of the kids of the King, and I received it well because every point was for me. Every point's for me with this whole 4 months and this morning of just confusion and angst, and I need to put all of those points into practice, and today's a new day to start. So thank you so much for your message, man. Thank you so much for your devotion to the Lord, and may you continue to prosper in a new venture that you're doing, especially with them kids.
yeah, man. Well, man, I think, you say that all three apply to you. I think you could probably teach that first one because you were like a joy factory. Everywhere you go. I remember my kids, I think we're on the same baseball team as some friends of yours. And my kids are on the team, and you cheered for my kids louder than I cheered for my kids. And you're like, ah! I remember, it was the best thing ever. So I think you're winning that one.
Yes. So maybe the first one was for me, but the other two are for me as well, as far as the sphere of influence that I have. So yeah, just thank you again, man, for just showing up and showing out. Thank you so much. It was very, very much received in the Palmer household.
Awesome, man.
Mike, wanted to talk a little bit about what dads are facing and grandparents are facing right now, and that's the returning of school and opening of schools, and just a prayer out to God to lead us and what's best for our children, whether they do you homeschool them, do you send them to school, and those who don't have a choice that have to go to school in this pandemic. It's just not only I don't have any kids who are in that situation, but I certainly fear for all those out there who are facing that situation.
Well, and for us, I think right now, if there's one word that I think probably needs to cover everything, is grace. I think that nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's swinging the bat, trying to figure out what's right. That's why I think, without not in the political side, but any politician, the governors, mayors, president, anybody who's dealing with this right now, it's so easy to criticize because no one's been through this right now. And so it's so easy to criticize, and it's so easy to look at other parents, and for some reason we like to draw these boxes around things. And the statement that has been so true, I know in my life, is that we judge other people's actions, but we judge our intentions. And so if I choose not to send my kids to school, but they do, I typically don't know the reasons why, and so we judge them going through it. And I think what we have to do is we have to give everybody the benefit of this. Everyone's trying to do the best. Everyone's trying to figure it out. Everyone's trying to go through it, especially other parents. And really it is, every parent has to decide what is the appropriate thing for them to do. And what do they feel like God is kind of leading them to do? Like for us, our school here asked us, you have 3 options. You can either send them to school, traditional school. They can do some online with a little bit of electives where you come to the school, or you do online only where it's complete homeschool. And for us, my wife and I, we kind of prayed about it, what's the right thing for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually do the traditional school. We're going to send them to school basically. But just because that's right for me doesn't mean it's right for everyone. And that's what we feel like is the right thing to do for us. And so I think for everyone, they have to decide in this season, in the midst of the pandemic, we all struggle for that, what's right and what's wrong. I think I think more than ever, it's what's right or what's wrong for you. And having grace for people who decide different than we do. And the struggle that we have with that is, if you decide different than I do, then you make me question my decision. And so the tendency is, I want to demonize you because your choice has now made me question mine. But if I can make you a bad person or make your choice bad, then it makes my choice a lot easier to be good. And so I just think not doing that and giving grace for all of it is so important in the season. So that's my diplomatic non-answer for you, Tim, when it has to do with what's the right thing to do. I have no idea. All I know is what the right thing for us and what we feel like that is right now.
You know, Mike, I'd like to just add to all of that, that one of the things we need to look at is what's the greater good for the nation as a whole. And there's statistics now coming out about many of the European countries who have opened up the schools, and all the kids are going back to school, and their COVID cases are no worse than ours are here in the United States. And the death rate of children under 15 years old is almost non-existent. There are very few of them, but it's almost non-existent. I think there's been like 15 deaths in the United States of people under the age of 15. And then we have to think of the greater good too, because by forcing the kids not to come to school and to stay home and to homeschool, you're forcing the parents to stay home. They can't go to work. And we're going to take this recession that we're in and we're going to convert it into a depression. So I think that we need to think more about the greater good too, not just be selfish about what's right for us.
Well, and I think another thing we have to think about is, if we decide we're going to bring our kids home and keep them at home school, and this is what I've not figured out, because I would really like to suspend them from school, because I want them around all the time. So that's hard. And I don't know I'm just kidding. I don't know what to do with all that, but yeah, I think all of it, you have to think about what all the different angles are. And there's so many different angles to it, and so much complexity to it. And so many, and I think the tough part is, there are so many arguments on each side, and there's so much, everybody has scripture, you know, when they're arguing. So people are Christians on both sides of it who are fighting one way or the other. And so it is a complex mess. And in the midst of it all, you've got Facebook, which basically has lined its algorithms up, where now we're typically only seeing opinions that we agree with. And so it reinforces our opinions more and more and more. And so it's super complex. And again, I'm not even going to pretend that I know. I can't even prescribe for anybody else. I just know that for us, you know, this is what we're doing.
And I just want to say something as well, that really, when it comes to schools, a lot of the hardest hit communities by COVID-19 are the inner city communities. And so when it comes to that, sending a lot of the kids back to school, it is needed, the academic education, because they've fallen behind a lot. But however, a lot of the kids that I work with live with a grandparent or someone that's at high risk. And so when you send the kid to school and they may bring it home, then they infect possibly their family. And our foster care system here is already can't handle any more kids. And so when you're talking about possibly losing a loved one that is your primary caretaker, that's a greater risk. So I just want people to also think about that as we say things, you know, and or as we move towards open an economy and doing things, that there's also a very volatile population there that is at risk by sending kids back to school so soon.
Hello, guys. This is Wayne Williams. I believe the danger we run into if we don't send these kids back to school is we're going to lose a year of education. Now, my kids are grown and gone, and so this is just an opinion of me looking into the school system. But it seems to me that if we let the kids stay out of school for a year, then that's effectively holding them back a year. And then what happens as they get into the 12th and 13th and in college, effectively they're going to have to go to school further. We might have to go for 14 years of school rather than 12. So I think that if we don't get them back and get them educated, then what's going to happen, there's going to be a tear or a blank spot in their growth and in their education. And that will show up later on in their life whenever they're 19 and 20 and 21.
I have a different opinion. I think this virus and kids being at home, and school work at home, online, has exposed the number of hours that they really need or are getting in public school. People I know in my family, nephews, nieces that have children, discovered that, gee, they can do a whole week's worth of work in 8-10 hours with their teacher online. What were they doing in school all those other hours? Well, it was filler. And, you know, one of my daughters did 12 years of school and 10 without all the fill. You know, thank you, dear. Got a great cup of coffee. And I think it's exposed that. And I think a lot of the public schools, school districts need to be held accountable, frankly, for what they do with the children during the day.
All right, gentlemen, it's about that time to wrap things up. Mike, thank you so much for waking up an hour earlier and coming back and inspiring us today. Your 3 points were right on track.
Thank you, Mike.
We miss you.
No problem. So good to hang out with you guys and be with you guys. Love you guys. Miss you.
We miss you too, and our prayers are with you and your family. And God, I just pray that we as men of faith in there, that we can all be openness about the things that are going on and use openness, and that God, that you use us how you need us to be out there, and that we listen to you and make an impact on those and others. God, we have something that's special here that you want us to keep going on, and it has been working, and it will continue to work if we apply your wisdom to it. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Chris, and all those who helped make this a great weekly inspirational thing. With that, any other prayer requests before we wrap up? Okay, guys, have a great week. Email any of us, Chris or myself, if you have any questions or comments. We're always open for improvement, and we look forward to putting this out there on YouTube and Chris's notes that come out during the midweek. Thank you, and have a blessed weekend.
Well, thank you all for everything you do to make this possible for us.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Chris.